Can you please just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so hey, good afternoon, everyone. And Kirill, again, thanks for the introduction. And really, thanks for inviting me to give this talk. I have to say that it is always a pleasure to share my work with researchers that are interested in eye tracking research. So yes, my name is Francesco Walker. I have a background in cognitive psychology, and right now I am an assistant professor at Leiden University. So as you probably figured from the title of this talk, and as Kirill was briefly mentioning, my work branches into quite different directions. I investigate art perception, meaning that I collaborate with museums to study how visitors perceive art and how we can use this information to actually improve their experience. But at the same time, I also investigate user interactions with automated vehicles, with self-driving cars, with a main focus on trust in automation. Now, although these are, of course, two very distinct subjects, they can be investigated through a lot of the same methods and tools. And I mean, that's why we're here today, right? So I would like to tell you more on how mobile eye tracking has impacted my work in the last couple of years. But before diving into all that, just let me briefly tell you something more about myself. Because, you know, I am half Italian and half British, and I actually come from the most beautiful city in the world. And well, I hope that some of you have my same city in mind. I come from Rome. And, you know, Rome is definitely known for its impressive architecture. This is the Trevi Fountain. If you've never seen it, please make sure to drop by because it's stunning. Rome is known for beautiful art. This is the Trevi Fountain, Fontana di Trevi. No, sorry, this is La Genesi di Michelangelo. I was still on the previous picture. Rome is also known for very, very, very exciting football. This is Francesco Totti, King of Rome, that actually retired just a couple of years ago, a very sad moment for all of us. Rome is also known for less exciting football and, I mean, of course, stunning views. And well, after completing my bachelor's in psychology, I decided to move from Rome to the Netherlands. And while I first moved to Amsterdam for my master's in cognitive neuropsychology, then I moved to University of Twente, that's in the east of the country. In Twente, I did my PhD and I investigated human interactions with self-driving cars. And finally, I moved to Leiden University, where I am currently working as an assistant professor in the cognitive psychology department, and where I am actually happily coordinating the applied cognitive psychology master track. So that's a little bit about myself. But my eye tracking journey actually starts in 2016. In 2016, I just completed my master's degree in Amsterdam, and I came up with this research proposal aimed to untangle the, I want to say, close but almost unknown link between art perception and eye movement behavior. And well, to my great surprise, back in the days, the proposal was actually picked up by the Van Gogh Museum, so by a very important museum in the country. So let me start this talk by telling you more about art perception and more specifically about the Van Gogh Museum eye tracking project. You see, paintings are a special kind of stimuli, quite difficult to research in the lab. And that's because in the lab, factors such as color, size, and environment are very difficult to take into account. And with the Van Gogh Museum eye tracking project, we wanted to overcome these issues by analyzing viewing patterns in a natural setting and so in an actual museum. And we brought this one step further by investigating not only viewing patterns, but by comparing the ones used by children with the ones used by adults. Something that, to the best of my knowledge, was never done before. So we did this by using a mobile eye tracker developed by Pupil Labs, the one that you see actually here on the picture on the slide. And well, I believe that some of you might be familiar with this. But before giving you more details about this study, just let me briefly tell you something about attentional control. And I'm sorry if you're already familiar with this. But attention can be divided in top-down and bottom-up. Top-down attentional control is goal-driven, so driven by factors that are internal to the individual. If I'm looking for a specific person in a crowd, that will be driven by top-down factors, so by our knowledge of how this person actually looks like. Bottom-up attention is stimulus-driven, so driven by factors that are external to the individual, basically driven by the physical characteristics of the stimulus. A red umbrella popping out from a bunch of black ones will immediately and automatically capture your attention if you can actually see it. Now, the same applies to paintings as well. If you know that David Hockney uses a very specific painting style, you will probably start scanning the artwork to find those elements that make his paintings so unique. That is top-down attention. But if you have never seen a Hockney before, well then, first of all, you're welcome, it's on the screen, then there is a big chance that your attention will be immediately captured by the salient elements of the painting. Salient because they stand out due to form and color, and that's bottom-up attention. Now, research suggests that children rely more on bottom-up attention. Top-down processing increases with life experience. So, you know, we thought, well, first of all, is this actually true? And secondly, does this also apply to paintings? Because if it does, then children and adults might be viewing paintings in a completely different way. So to answer these questions, we selected a group of 12 children and 12 adults, and we asked them to view 5 different paintings displayed at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And here you can see on screen actually a picture of how the experiment setting looked like. We placed markers around the paintings that allowed the automatic detection of the surfaces. And, you know, although the markers are quite visible, and I can really assure you that it was a very complicated job convincing the Van Gogh Museum that we needed these markers around the paintings. When you actually go to analyze the data, this method saves a lot of time compared to manually placing each fixation on a still image, something that is commonly done when you use Tobii Pro Lab, if you're familiar with the software. Anyway, we divided our study into 2 phases. Phase 1 corresponded to a free viewing phase. So here we simply asked our participants to freely view each painting for 30 seconds. But in phase 2, before letting them view the same paintings once again, we gave them some background information about each of the paintings. And this information highlighted elements of the paintings that are not immediately visible at first sight. So through the free viewing phase, we really wanted to test if the attention of our 2 groups was more top-down or bottom-up driven. And through the information phase, we wanted to test how, well, let's say, top-down elements, so knowledge, would influence participants' viewing patterns. And I just wanted to give you a closer look of the 5 paintings that we selected for our study, all painted by Van Gogh, of course. And these are the respective saliency maps computed through MATLAB's saliency toolbox. Because, of course, if we want to know if people go more towards salient elements of the paintings, we need an objective measurement of how salient an area actually is. So let me guide you through the results. On the x-axis here, we have the very first 5 fixations, and those are actually the ones that you need if you want to check if there is more bottom-up attentional capture. And on the y-axis, we have saliency. So just as a reminder, the more a specific area stands out, the more salient it is. Each value above 0 indicates that the participant is saliency driven, so it's going towards salient areas. And so we can assume bottom-up capture. Values below 0 indicate that the participant is less saliency driven, therefore top-down attention. Now, what you see on screen right now are actually the adults. And phase 1 and phase 2 of the adults are actually quite similar, showing that although there seems to be more top-down capture during phase 2, and that's of course to be expected since they did receive information during this phase, there actually is no significant difference between these two phases for the adults. But what's really interesting is what's happening with the children. Here you can see that especially their very first fixation not only is much more saliency driven than what we saw in the previous graph with the adults, but also goes much more towards salient areas of the paintings during phase 1 compared to phase 2. And this is a very important result, showing that children actually view art in a different way compared to the adults, but also that the information received during phase 2 still has a very strong effect on their viewing strategies. For the Van Gogh Museum eye tracking project, we showed for the very first time that when viewing art, children and adults use very different visual strategies. Children tend to go more towards the salient elements of the paintings and so are more bottom-up driven, while adults are more goal-driven, so influenced by factors such as knowledge and expectations. This is a really valuable result, and a result not only for us researchers interested in art perception, but also for museum educators that are constantly trying to improve, are constantly trying to fine-tune the experience of their visitors. So we actually published these findings, these results in 2017 in PLOS ONE. So please feel free to take a look at the article. Now, I would actually love to tell you more about this project. Art perception is still a true passion of mine, but today I would also like to share with you some other insights from my other line of work. So once that this project was over, I thought that I would keep going on this path, investigating art perception or maybe conducting museum studies. Well, that's not actually what I ended up doing. As I briefly mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, through my PhD, I investigated human interactions with automated vehicles, with self-driving cars. And well, I've always been in the lucky position of studying topics that truly interest me, not only on a professional, but also on a more personal level. And I have to say that self-driving cars, intelligent transportation is definitely one of them. And as a big plus, it actually turns out that being familiar with mobile eye tracking research can be quite handy in this line of work. My PhD was actually part of a very big project called iCave. And the goal of iCave was to develop a self-driving car, actually the one that you see here on screen. And I have to say it was a really cool project. We had all the technical universities of the Netherlands working on this. So we had engineers focusing on the behavior and reliability of the car, but our group focused more on the human factors challenges that this vehicle was supposed to face. So we investigated how this vehicle is supposed to interact with vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians. But we also investigated the trust of the drivers towards this technology. And while working on all this, I was involved in quite a few eye tracking projects. And today I would like to share with you 2 of them. The first of these projects concerns how pedestrians interact with automated vehicles. This is really a big challenge in the field, and researchers are investigating ways through which the vehicle can communicate its intentions pedestrians and cyclists. And this information is conveyed through external human-machine interfaces, or EHMIs in short. And here on screen, you can see a few examples. On the top right, we have the smiling car by Samcon, in which the car smiles to indicate that it is safe to cross the road. But we could also have actual messages displayed to pedestrians, and that is actually what you see in other examples on this slide. But for this eye tracking project, we were actually not interested in what, let's say, crossing information should be conveyed, but we were mostly interested in where this information should be displayed. So to answer this question, we conducted an eye tracking study and investigated what pedestrians look for when interacting with a yielding vehicle. We had our pedestrians standing on the edge of the road, and we asked them to indicate through a slider their willingness to cross the road as a car was approaching them. And we recorded participants' eye movements by using Tobii Pro Glasses 2. So basically the question is, do participants look at different areas of the vehicle as this is approaching them? And if the answer is yes, this could tell us where information for pedestrians should be displayed on an automated vehicle. So let me show you some results. What we found is that pedestrians displayed a clear gaze pattern as the yielding vehicle was approaching them. And that is what you see here in this graph. When the car was far away, and that's the left side of this graph, pedestrians did not really seem to pay much attention to it. And that's why you see a lot of green and blue of the figure, where blue is the road and green is the environment surrounding the participant, the pedestrian. But as the car started getting closer to the pedestrian, and so as we move from left to right on this graph, eye movement shifted first to the bumper and then to the windshield of the car. And of course, this is actually what our heat maps show as well. Try to pay attention to how fixations are initially in front of the car, but as this gets closer, and so as the GIF moves forward, we get more fixations on the bumper and finally on the windshield. On the top right of this GIF, you see the meters, so how far the car is from the participant. So once again, this is the start. You see a lot of fixations on the road. As the car starts getting closer, here more bumper, more bumper, more bumper, and then finally we have the windshield. And we believe that this information really brings us one step forward in understanding where on automated vehicles information to crossing pedestrians should be displayed. All right, I would like to mention another challenge of great importance when we talk about users' interactions with automated vehicles. And that is how we can improve the trust of the driver. Now, the word improve is actually quite misleading, suggesting that we should always try to increase the trust of the user. But what famous accidents involving Tesla's autopilot have taught us is that very high levels of trust can lead to really dangerous situations. So you see, in some cases, you don't trust automation, and so we don't use it, even though it would make our life a lot easier. And this is, for example, when my mom does not want to use cruise control because she doesn't trust it, although, you know, cruise control is perfectly safe technology, and it can actually make your ride a lot more comfortable. But in other cases, we might trust automation too much and rely on it during dangerous situations. The example that you see on screen is someone sleeping in a Tesla while the Tesla is on autopilot, something that you should never do. And if you're interested why you should never do that, well, feel free to bring that question up because I can talk about this for hours. So anyway, ideally, you want to avoid all this and match driver's trust with the actual capabilities of the vehicle. And this is known as trust calibration. Now, although trust calibration is, of course, desirable, there is actually no consensus on how this can be achieved. But one thing is sure, if we do want to achieve trust calibration, we need more reliable trust metrics. But up till now, most studies investigating trust towards automated vehicles have relied on self-reports. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against questionnaires. They can be a really great and valuable tool. But when it comes to trust in automation, if I want to tailor specific interventions to the trust of a driver, I need to know how high or how low the trust is in a very specific moment. And I mean, I simply cannot do that through a questionnaire. So we looked into more objective and continuous measures of trust in automation, and while eye tracking seems to be one of the most promising ones. So we ran a study in our driving simulator and placed our participants into two different conditions. The perfect vehicle group experienced the car behaving perfectly on the road. Conversely, the poor vehicle group experienced the car behaving very poorly, meaning that the car tended to drift towards the center of the road and braked abruptly in front of crossing cyclists and pedestrians. We asked participants to perform a secondary task, but only if they trusted the behavior of the automated vehicle, all right? And well, of course, we measured their eye movements with a Tobii again in this case. And what we found is that the higher the trust of the users towards the simulated vehicle, the less time they spent viewing the road and the more time they spent viewing the secondary task. Now, in this study, we actually also measured participants' electrodermal activity and participants' skin conductance by using an Empatica wristband. I'm a big fan of wearables, so I always try to integrate them when I can. And actually, our results were strikingly in line with the eye tracking ones. The higher the trust of the user, the lower their electrodermal activity. So, you know, keeping developing these kind of measurements is fundamental for the investigation of trust and can really bring us closer in achieving true trust calibration. Now, imagine this scenario. The driver in the self-driving car in green just disengaged the automated system. And by looking at the picture, we can tell that the reason is probably the kid crossing the road. And this is exactly what the eye tracking data would tell us. Heat maps would, and these are made up heat maps, so they're not reliable, but heat maps would show us that in a specific time frame, indeed the kid is the object that the driver paid more attention to, and he is likely the reason of the disengagement. Now, while this scenario is obvious, there are many other complex situations in which the driver might activate or deactivate the system for apparently no reason at all. And that is really where this kind of technology can come in handy. A system like this that relies on real-time eye tracking data can really help engineers to understand drivers' needs and behaviors. Oh, all right, so this brings me towards the end of this talk, and I would actually like to conclude by bringing forward just a couple of things I'm working on right now. So, talking about trust towards automated vehicles, there needs to be more consensus on this topic. And this is why I recently launched a Frontiers special issue titled Trust in Automated Vehicles. So I put together a team of amazing editors, all experts in the field, and I'm really happy to share that we are receiving a lot of submissions. So actually, if you know anyone interested in this topic, the deadline is approaching, but of course we can ask for an extension. So really feel free to send them in my direction. What I'm also very happy to share is that together with all these experts, we are writing a fundamental paper in which we will bring forward strong statements about this topic. And well, one of the sections of this paper focuses on trust measurements. So there will definitely be space to discuss how eye tracking technology can be used for this purpose. But I would actually like to conclude this talk in the way in which I started, with art perception. You know, when I was hired from Leiden University about 2 years ago, I never kept hidden my passion for art. I told them, you know, it's true, my PhD is all about cars and automation, and I truly love investigating that topic. But if you do hire me for this position, I would also like to continue my research on art perception. I want to do both. I was extremely clear about that. So actually, right now, I'm collaborating with the Rijksmuseum, that is one of the biggest, and actually one of the most important museums in the Netherlands. And well, we are working together with our educational department, and we are investigating if painting descriptions specifically written for children will get them to view details that they would usually ignore. And importantly, we really hope that this will also lead to a better appreciation of the artworks. So, of course, this work will help us to see if using specific text is useful, but it can actually do much more than that. Studies like this can really help us bringing children closer to art and could really lead to the development of new educational strategies and tools that can be used by both museums, but also schools. I want to conclude by saying that the possible applications of what we are working on are often much wider than what we actually imagine. And I mean, I've just touched on two of these applications, cars and art. I personally love to think outside of the box, and maybe just like me, you may find out that what you're doing in one domain might be extremely useful in another. Thank you very much.